now to part 4, interfaith dialogue. So clearly, in interfaith dialogue, as elsewhere, Pope Francis is building on what's been said in the Church and by his predecessors before. There's a nice quote from Pope John Paul II speaking in India to religious leaders: "By dialogue we let God be present in our midst, for as we open ourselves to one another, we open ourselves to God." So it's not just a nice thing to do or a good thing to do, and it's not only to build up the common good, that God is in that interreligious dialogue. So Pope Francis, before he became Pope, as Cardinal Bergoglio, was a very good friend of, and remains a good friend with, a Jewish rabbi, Abraham Skorka. Abraham Skorka, who is now a regular visitor to the Vatican, who accompanied Pope Francis on his trip to the Holy Land. And they put out a book together. They put out a book in 2011. And in that book, part that Cardinal Bergoglio writes, "Dialogue is born from an attitude of respect for the other person, from a conviction that the other person has something good to say. It assumes that there is room in the heart for the person's point of view, opinion, and proposal. To dialogue entails a cordial reception, not a prior condemnation. In order to dialogue, it's necessary to know how to lower the defenses, open the doors of the house, and offer human warmth." So we get something of the sense of his attitude or approach in engaging in dialogue. Keep in mind that notion about standing firm in one's tradition, and that notion of being open to the other as not being contradictory, but as being deeply in harmony with each other. So dialogue also, an interreligious dialogue, involves evangelization. He says, "We don't impose anything. We do not employ any subtle strategies for attracting believers. Rather, we bear witness to what we believe and who we are, with joy and simplicity." Dialogue begins with encounter, right? We need to enter into relationship with the other, with adherents of other religious traditions. Dialogue is not something you can do simply with books and in a classroom where you all come from the same tradition. Dialogue is interaction and encounter with living persons. Religions are made up of living people, and we need to engage in that encounter. Our CCCB document, A Church in Dialogue, summarized the genuine dialogue, and here referring to quotes from Pope Francis, Pope Benedict, Pope John Paul II. "Genuine dialogue does not entail giving up one's identity, compromising one's faith or morals, or falling into relativism. While bringing to bear all our experience, all our intelligence, there is a gospel simplicity about entering into dialogue." Dialogue seeks to identify, an interreligious dialogue seeks to identify what we hold in common. If we're honest in presenting our convictions, we'll be able to see more clearly what we hold in common. New avenues will be opened for mutual esteem, cooperation, and indeed friendship. So here we see some of the goals of interreligious dialogue: mutual esteem, cooperation, friendship, and the mapping out of what we hold in common. Dialogue is also essential to maintain, to foster world peace. Interreligious dialogue is a necessary condition for peace in the world. So it's a duty for Christians as well as other religious communities. And here we see also an invitation for political leaders, leaders of nations, to give attention to the value and importance of interreligious dialogue, that we, our political leaders, should be summoning our churches and religious traditions to engage in dialogue with each other, should foster that encounter, because religion is a constitutive aspect of societal life. So, Pope Francis has spoken a great deal lately about relations with Muslims, and that's for many reasons, because Islam is one of the largest religions in the world, that almost every country of the world, Christians and Muslims live side by side, but also the recent terrorist attacks from some groups who claim to be Muslims. He has spoken about the tragedy, spoken against terrorism, spoken in solidarity with persecuted Christians, but he's also said that we need to make distinctions between these terrorist attacks and between Muslims who are living out their faith out of the Quran, out of a deep religious spirit. And he's helped us to make those distinctions. This is a statement, a joint declaration with the Ecumenical Patriarch, leader in the Orthodox world, Patriarch Bartholomew, talking about the importance of relations and dialogue with Islam, not only for our respective traditions, but for the world. One of the things that has been established, and many of you would know this, is that years ago the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue in Rome started preparing a message once a year for each major religious tradition on a particular feast. So for the Islamic community, it's the end of Ramadan that the Vatican sends a message to Muslims around the world. And that message goes out from the Council for Interreligious Dialogue, from the Cardinal. But because of the importance of Islam, dialogue with Islam, and because of tensions between Christians and Muslims, Pope Francis himself wrote the message to Muslims at the end of Ramadan last year, and a beautiful message. And of course, I already started this section by talking about Cardinal Bergoglio's close friendship with Rabbi Skorka and long-standing relationship with the Jewish community. In the Joy of the Gospel, Pope Francis has 3 paragraphs which really speak the tradition that has grown within the Catholic Church about Judaism. But 3 things are brought out in these excerpts, which I think are a deepening of what we've said in the past. One about friendship, the second about regret, and the third about receptivity to gifts from the other. So dialogue and friendship with the children of Israel are part of the life of Jesus' disciples. It's part of the life of the Christian community to be engaged with Jewish people. The friendship which has grown between us, spoken as an existing reality, makes us bitterly and sincerely regret the terrible persecutions which they have endured and continue to endure, especially those that have involved Christians. So speaking about that anti-Semitic practice and tradition which has lived within Christianity in many ways. And then God continues to work among the people of the Old Covenant and to bring forth treasures of wisdom which flow from their encounter with His Word. So there are gifts to be received today from the Jewish community. It's a beautiful section worth reading.